Data Depot. Today is Thursday, December 2nd, and after a brief hiatus, we are back in action. Today, we will be talking about some NCAA football conference championships and how that relates to the college football playoffs. But first, my guest, David Campbell, how are you doing today?
Jeffrey, I'm great. I'm a big fan of Dean's Data Depot and a big fan of college football. So when you decide to merge the two, I'm so glad I'm able to come on today, talk about these conference championships.
Should be a lot of fun. So, per usual, I have built a metric to try and predict how the teams that are currently still in contention for a spot in the college football playoffs can get there using wins and losses at large with their overall record, as well as a bunch of subgroups such as against conference opponents, Power 5 opponents, ranked and unranked opponents. After weighting these differently and then summing them together based off of how this has been a factor in past playoff seedings, they're going to receive a playoff power score. Since the inception of the college football playoffs in 2014, 26 of the 28 teams to make the college football playoffs had a top 4 playoff power score. So this is pretty accurate in determining who will and will not make the playoffs. The average PPS of playoff teams is 279.1 compared to 173.3, a difference of almost over 100 between college football playoff teams and not, the highest score being 381 with Alabama in 2016. So presently, these are the top 4 teams as of last week by playoff power score: Georgia, Oklahoma State, Alabama, and Michigan. David, thoughts on these teams? It's a little Oklahoma State different from the college football playoffs rankings. Everyone else is in the top 4. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we can easily see that PPS can, tell who the best teams are, because I think top 4 to the top 5 in the actual CFP rankings, and all 5 of these teams, well, these 4 plus Cincinnati as well, who we'll get to in a minute, but all of them have an easy shot. They have, a realistic shot of getting in, one way or the other. The only one is Oklahoma State's different, but if Bama wins, they're in. Michigan wins, they're in. Georgia wins, they're in. So yeah, I think this is a pretty accurate description of the current landscape of college football.
Do you think Oklahoma State is a viable shot to make the college football playoffs, or do you think the top 4 are pretty set as it is with Cincinnati?
I think it's totally. I think Oklahoma State will make the playoff, just right off the bat, because I think Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship, thus knocking Alabama out of contention. In my opinion, I don't think a 2-loss non-conference champion should make the playoff. Oklahoma State gets in if they beat Baylor with Michigan, Georgia, and Cincinnati. The only issue comes with Oklahoma State is if Bama beats Georgia, because then you're not taking either Georgia or Bama out 1 loss. I think Georgia has already earned their spot. I think Bama beats Georgia, they've earned their spot. If Michigan beats Iowa, they've earned their spot. Cincinnati beats Houston, they've earned their spot. So the difference then becomes Cincinnati or Oklahoma State. Even if they win, there's 4 teams who you can argue are better than them. So that's where it becomes an issue. But I really do think Georgia beats Bama, which we'll obviously get into. But
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. All of those things are things that this sort of ranking system will come to fruition. So on that note, this is how all the top 10 teams compare with the adjusters compared to their college football playoff rankings. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Baylor all with the same rankings. BYU up 2 spots, Iowa up 5 over their college football playoff rankings. Cincinnati and Michigan both worse than their college football playoff ranking. We talked about Cincinnati sitting right on the outside, and we'll get to that as we get into the American Athletic Conference Championship. Do you think that they're a playoff team?
Absolutely. I think Cincinnati has earned their spot. Obviously it's very tough for a group of 5 to make their way in the top 4. But of what they did last year and then carry over that to this year, including big wins, including with the team that's at number 5 right here, Notre Dame in Notre Dame. I think that very impressive win. I think Cincinnati absolutely deserves to be in. If you ask me, that's what I thought. I think Cincinnati should be in. I think they're going to prove it, by the way, this Saturday by blowing out Houston.
So Cincinnati will play for the American Conference title on Saturday against Houston, as well as the Power 5 conference title games, which are all this weekend. So based on the amount of change that could take place based off of the outcome of these 6 conference championships, these are the 3 most influential conference games: the Big 12, the American, and the SEC. We talked about how if Alabama beats Georgia, that sort of throws a wrench in Oklahoma State's trip to the college football playoffs. Cincinnati winning should push them over the edge. Oklahoma State, if they beat Baylor, could make the case for being a lock for the college football playoffs. And Georgia, regardless of the outcome of their game, really has that all sewn up. Big Ten, or the Pac-12 and the ACC really don't have a shot of making it in. And then Michigan is sort of, What do you think about Michigan?
I think Michigan, first off, congratulations to Coach Harbaugh for finally getting over the hump of beating Ohio State. I think it'd be very Michigan-esque to lose to Iowa and Indianapolis this Saturday. However, this Michigan team is very, very good. They run the ball very well. This defense, this pass rush is unbelievable. And I think they do beat Iowa. I don't think they should be too worried. Obviously, you want to be prepared for the game, but I think Iowa, lost to Purdue at home, got destroyed by Wisconsin earlier this season. They played better, but they've had some quarterback issues as well. I'm thinking Michigan in that one for sure. But I think Michigan gets in. I think they are the number 2 seed if they win.
Yeah. So let's first start. Look, so this is based off of all of the outcomes of the conference football championship, based off of the extremes. So in the case that a team wins and then all of the other higher seeds lose, or all the other higher seeds win.
Yeah.
So in every single situation, Georgia is a top 4 team. We talked about how basically even if they lose to Alabama, their resume, they have steamrolled their way through the season that they are in. Michigan is in second in 87.5% of the situations. They also make the college football playoffs. We talked about how Iowa isn't really a threat. There's 2 other conferences that cannot really make it in. Notre Dame doesn't play this weekend. They're sitting at number 5, I believe.
They're 6.
Number 6 in college football playoff rankings. They are sort of, they have to stay put. Their fate is not really in their hands. And then Oklahoma State and Alabama, their fates are inextricably linked, right? We talked about Alabama beats Georgia.
They're
in. Oklahoma State's out. Oklahoma State wins really regardless. Alabama could still make it in even if they beat Georgia.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the trips to the playoffs for any of these 7 teams?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame especially is one interesting. You've seen a lot in the news lately of Brian Kelly, who just left. Their head coach left. They still have a chance, make the playoff. And it really becomes interesting if State loses, Bama loses, and Cincinnati loses. Does Notre Dame get in? That's the question you have to ask yourself. So I think it becomes very interesting. The Fighting Irish are a team to really look for. I don't see a way. There is obviously a way, but personally, I don't think it will happen. I think that Notre Dame gets left out this year, but they're still a very successful program, and they'll have a lot of good times to come.
Absolutely. So now moving to these conference championship games, SEC, Alabama. Who's your pick?
I think that Georgia's the best team in the country. I really do think that it's by far the Bulldogs. I think they're not going to lose a game the rest of the year. And Bama is a team that could keep it close, but I'm going to go with the Bulldogs. I think Georgia takes this one. I think they're incredible. I think they're absolutely incredible. One of the best teams that we've seen in a long time. By far the best defense, I think, in college football history.
Yeah, and so, Alabama coming off that scare against Auburn. Records sort of go out the window in the Iron Bowl, but Georgia definitely seems to be the better team this year. And so with giving them 359 points, that locks up the first seed. They're going to earn about 50 or so more points for beating ranked conference Power 5 school. That's going to move them, give them the top spot, really regardless of what else happens should they beat Alabama. Alabama then drops with that loss to number 6 and makes their path to the playoff nearly impossible.
Yeah, for sure.
So now moving to the Big Ten, this is, as a Gopher fan, your home conference, Michigan and Iowa.
Yeah, so Iowa Hawkeyes got in because the Gophers beat Wisconsin on Saturday. We reclaimed the axe, but we did Iowa the favor here. I don't think they're good enough to beat Michigan. I'm going to go with the Wolverines in this one. I think Michigan is, like I said, very strong. I think Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo off the edge for this team are nearly unstoppable. And Iowa's always been known as a good offensive line school. However, I got the Wolverines taking this one. I think Hassan Haskins runs for another huge day for him.
Yeah, so with a Michigan win, that would move them, for the time being, we haven't gone to the Oklahoma State Big 12 game, but that moves them into the second spot. So, and that moves Iowa down. Really, they didn't have a shot of getting in. Anyway,
they need a minor miracle for them to have any chance of getting in.
Many things have to go their way in order for them to leapfrog four teams to make it in there. Moving on now to the Oklahoma State Baylor game. Oklahoma State winning with that Bedlam matchup, living up to its name against Oklahoma. Are they going to knock off Baylor?
I think Baylor can win this game. I really, really do. And then they knocked off Oklahoma earlier in the season. Baylor's a really strong team. I think that Oklahoma State plays some defense in the Big 12, which is super rare to see for Big 12 football. I'm going with the Cowboys in this one. I think Oklahoma State was led by Spencer Sanders, who, seeing Spencer Sanders in the college football playoff is not something I expected to say at the beginning of this season, but I got the Cowboys in this one.
So with an Oklahoma State win, that moves them, that they leapfrog Michigan, and then move into the number 2 spot, they would play Michigan in that 2-3 matchup. That also drops, if you notice, Baylor out. BYU moves up. They don't really have a shot of getting in. Like Notre Dame, they don't play this week. Notre Dame moves up, and Pittsburgh, who is in the ACC championship, again, another long shot to make it in. They move up to the 10th highest PPS score here. And Cincinnati then is now in the number 5 position. Pac-12. This game really has absolutely no bearing on the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
But just for the heck of it, who's your pick?
I think Oregon gets their revenge after losing to Utah. Utah kind of spoiled their season. That's my friend Adam Busak once said. He's a big Pac-12 guy, and he goes, whatever happens to the Pac-12 is going to be the worst possible scenario for the entire conference. However, Oregon wins this one. I got the Ducks. They run the ball very well. I think Anthony Brown's a good quarterback, and I think they get their revenge against Utah.
Yeah. So despite an early season success beating Ohio State, they weren't able to really rekindle that firepower late in the season. They're not even in our top 10 here. Again, that matchup really has no bearing on the college football playoffs. Now moving to perhaps the most interesting case that we've seen in recent history. Notre Dame has always been successful. They are the only non-power, or they're considered Power 5, but not in an official conference. They're the only ones to ever make the college football playoffs. Cincinnati, though, has a chance to do that by beating Houston.
Yep.
Cincinnati and Houston, American Athletic Conference Championship. Who do you pick?
I got Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is a really just overall strong team. People want to talk about how they're Power 5 and not strong, but I love the Bearcats. They play defense. They have one of the best cornerbacks in the upcoming draft class. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the upcoming draft class as well in Desmond Ridder. I think that this Cincinnati team is so strong, and I think we can get into it more, but I truly believe Cincinnati is the only team that will keep it close with Georgia. I think that's the only team that will. Can is different. Alabama can totally play a close game. Not so much close, but competitive game against Georgia. I think Cincinnati is the only team that will. I think Cincinnati is the only team that will.
Interesting. So with Cincinnati winning, this shakes up some stuff. So Notre Dame doesn't play, but because Cincinnati is playing Houston is ranked, I think, number 21 or something like that, low 20s. They're not Power 5, but it's still a conference game, so they don't get that same boost that any of these Power 5 schools would do by beating a ranked conference opponent.
Houston's a great team. Houston lost their first game of the season against Texas Tech when they were up by 17 at some point. They're a very, very strong side, and they should be ranked a lot higher in my opinion. However, the committee views it differently.
Right. So that win doesn't quite get them a conference championship doesn't quite get them past Michigan, but it does get them over Notre Dame, who now drops to 5. Notre Dame really, like we said numerous times, does not control their fate this weekend. And so then they get bumped out. Cincinnati then moves up to the number 4 spot and would play Georgia.
Yep.
Do you think that is a matchup that will be close?
I think that'd be a very entertaining matchup. I really do think Cincinnati's earned the spot to be 2 or 3. I think I would move Michigan to 2, and I would move Oklahoma State down to 4.
Okay.
It's going to be a little controversial for all the Oklahoma State fans. However, these two teams are very close. I think even if we put Cincinnati at 2, I wouldn't be against it. And I love Cincinnati. I know people aren't going to like that so much because of, like I said, non-Power 5, Group of 5. But I think they've really proved it themselves. They have one of the best wins in the country. At this point, I guess going on the road to beat Notre Dame might be the best win in the country at the end of the year. On paper, top 10 team on the road. So I also would love to see a Cincinnati-Georgia championship. And I think that, like I said, neither of these teams can keep it close to Georgia. I really don't think they can. And honestly, I think Cincinnati's the only team that will and can, other than Bama. But that's just my opinion. They did it last year in the Peach Bowl, was it? I'm not quite sure for sure. But it was Cincinnati kept it close and almost beat the Georgia team. And obviously, Georgia's a lot better this year. But
right.
Yes, I think that Cincinnati will make it if they win. 2, 3, or 4 is up for grabs. But right now, Oklahoma State's behind them, it's going to be close. The committee has a lot of tough decisions to make.
Right.
I can also see the committee putting Cincinnati at 4 and just saying when Georgia plays them, Georgia very much could beat them by 40. They very much could do that just because that's how good Georgia is. And that means no more Group of 5 the rest of eternity.
Right. Well, and a Cincinnati-Georgia matchup would be just the second time 2 undefeated teams have played in the first round, in the semifinal round of the college football playoffs. The only other time, Notre Dame played Alabama, I'm pretty sure. 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. So Cincinnati really representing the rest of college football if they potentially make it to the college football playoffs. Now, the last championship game that we have on here, Pitt and Wake Forest, again, like the Pac-12, not a huge bearing on there. Pittsburgh has impressed this year. Wake Forest has impressed this year. As a Raleigh, North Carolina native, I've seen a lot more of this ACC football. They blew that game against Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill. So Wake Forest a little shaky. Pittsburgh has had some good wins over NC State. So what's your thoughts?
Give me Pittsburgh in this one. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Kenny Pickett, which is an awful name for a quarterback. But I think that Pittsburgh, very great year for both these. This is great to see, not Clemson.
Right.
We don't like Clemson in every single year, but I'm going Pittsburgh with this one. I think Pittsburgh knocks off Wake Forest and takes over the ACC. Again, really good year for Pittsburgh. Congratulations to them. They'll get in a potential they will get in a New Year's Six game. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh, a long shot to make the college football playoffs, but a win would jump them all the way to 6 in the playoff power score rankings. So a great year for a non-Clemson ACC team, as well as Wake Forest, who has played very well.
Great season for them. You love to see a school like Wake Forest, who's always had some athletics who they've never been that great as Wake Forest. Maybe about basketball, you've had Tim Duncan and Chris Paul, but football team's never been this good. And it's awesome to see Wake Forest do this.
Absolutely. So our final 4 still remains: Georgia, Oklahoma State, Michigan, and Cincinnati. If this holds, this would create some very interesting college football playoff matchups. But this is going to be an exciting weekend full of some good college football. Thank you, David, for joining me.
Of course.
This has been the Dean's Data Depot. We'll see you next time.